Have I got the deal for you? The Platinum Nintendo Lunchbox, great carrying handle, Super Smash Bros. Melee included, and a Pokemon Ruby projectile. All for $5.99 in the next hour. Call now, call now, call now. Disclaimer, 1 hour after this video is uploaded. If you have any questions, please let me know at SpireFan, Pete IV at sbcglobal.net. I remember many years ago when Disney was putting out their sequel movies for Star Wars. And I remember from the get-go, there were some issues, and I think one of the big issues that I picked up on Force Awakens was I don't think there was a lot of homework done. You watch a show like Clone Wars, you watch a show like Rebels, and the creators there are doing a lot of homework on what Star Wars is, what's the universe, what's the context around it. The thing with the sequel trilogy is there definitely was a priority to make some money. And it's good that movies make money and keep things in circulation. People are entertained. They give their money for a ticket and their time. There's definitely a good cycle, but that's, I think, for good art, good movies. And I think the Disney attempted movies, they're like, as like a not really use your brain sci-fi roller coaster flick. They're fine. Like an alternate universe where so many things go bad. Okay. But even with that, there's a lot of things that have to be explained, and they're struggling to do it. And I remember, unfortunately, I think Daisy Ridley's a great actress. I think she was given a character that the creators weren't putting as much effort in as other Star Wars characters in general. The sad part is, if you gave her a character really similar to Luke or Anakin, I think she would have killed it. But she did the most of what she was given, and unfortunately what she was given was a character that really didn't have a lot of big challenges thrown her way. And this is when the discussion of Mary Sue was coming up, which is sad because, again, I think she's a good actress. She didn't deserve the flack going that way, but the people that greenlit how this character was portrayed, yeah, they need to readjust. And unfortunately, readjusting in what you're trying to call, Star Wars Episode 7, 8, and 9. The thing is, during those discussions, I realized people were trying to call Luke a Mary Sue. And I'm glad they did that because it makes you go back to the original trilogy and you realize how even more incorrect that statement is, because it makes you realize that Luke's failures are amazing. They're tragic, but they're amazing for a main character. I've talked to my parents about what it was like growing up for them when Star Wars came out. They were both, in their teens. And when Episode 4 came out, it was huge. It was a huge moment. My mom was, she was still a kid. My dad in his teens, but they were both super young. And I remember, they just both would tell me their accounts of not just Episode 4, but the original trilogy. And, my dad talking about how sci-fi movies, while there's been good ones before that for sure, there was nothing like Star Wars. The high-octane action, the sound effects, the lore already being established. I love that Luke mentions the Clone Wars in Episode 4, or how Grand Moff Tarkin mentions, the Imperial Senate, which is, the remnants of the Old Republic Senate, right? That being swept away, showing how much Palpatine wanted to get rid of them over time. And one thing I love is that they could have easily had a main character like Luke be nearly flawless, but instead you have a pretty realistic depiction of a go-getter farm boy that strives to do good in the world. And so there's a blend of believability where, people say, oh, how could he shoot the Death Star and destroy it? Well, not only, is he force sensitive, and, he force sensitive from a father that is the chosen one, but that's the thing, that's not the write-off here. right? So if I just said, oh yeah, his dad was the chosen one, yeah, that sounds a little bit lazy for writing, but it's a combination of he has these innate powers, but he talked about he used to shoot womp rats for a long time on Tatooine. When you think about how long he lived on Tatooine, yeah, that dude was probably polishing his aiming skills for a long time. It's really cool, and I appreciate that. So that's a pretty deserved win. Also, you watch Rogue One, or you play the Star Wars Dark Forces games with Kyle Katarn, where he gets the Death Star plans there from both angles. There's a lot of work put into getting the Death Star plans, so there's definitely a lot of well-deserved build-up there. And then I remember Episode 5 came out, and the "No, I'm your father" line, one of the biggest lines, not just in cinema, but of all time. That is a huge turning point because, again, it shows Luke deserving his wins, but also, he's kind of a scrappy go-getter in Episode 4. He's not trained in in lightsaber combat at all, but he's trying, which is cool, right? But with that energy, he kind of overextends and goes to fight Darth Vader pretty early. And, Yoda and Obi-Wan warned him of that. And these, the Disney sequel attempts, they definitely got me to re-look at that scene where he fights Vader. And, Darth Vader just flat out says, "You are beaten." And it cuts off his hand. "Don't make me destroy you." I think that's one of the most underrated parts of Empire Strikes Back is, obviously people remember "I'm your father." They remember the Empire striking back. But that pivotal moment there, even not even talking about the father reveal, Luke failed. And it's that kind of like rare Hollywood. I mean, George Lucas wasn't Hollywood with these movies, but it got so popular that it was lined up with other Hollywood films by now. So for all case and purposes, what we knew as the norm for action fantasy characters, they often won all the time, right? You're supposed to have this main character that is strong, bold, triumphant. And here we have our main character failing, not just failing, but, losing it, part of his arm, his hand, the main villain saying you're beaten. He's cornered in a pretty, if you definitely have a fear of heights, that's probably going to bring out a lot of those fears, which I think adds to a lot of the drama there. But the fact that Luke gets beaten and he bounces back, and that's the thing. What's cool is in Return of the Jedi, even after he fails, he picks himself back up, and by the time of Return of the Jedi, people consider him a Jedi, right? He kind of basically was a Padawan for episodes 4 and 5, but he really, as Darth Vader said, your training is complete. And I love not only that Luke's composure is strong and stern, but even in Return of the Jedi, they still kind of subvert expectations, and he still has a bit of failure. He does give in to his anger during that fight against his father on the second Death Star with Darth Sidious there. And, just looking at the big picture here, I think depicting Luke's failures is such a pivotal part in the saga, because not only do they depict his failures of him picking himself back up, but when he wins, it does feel well-deserved in so many instances. In Return of the Jedi, he wins by self-control, by compassion. He knows his father is still there. Anakin Skywalker is still there. And that scene where he takes off his father's mask, it makes my eyes water every time. When Darth Vader says, "You were right about me." I think there needs to be a bigger analysis of when you make a good character, it's important to add, as Shrek talks about, layers, right? And these layers, these dynamic things of not being afraid of your main character failing is important. And it would have been fascinating to see Daisy Ridley play a character, even similar to Luke. I know people talk about they don't like how much Force Awakens is similar to Episode 4. That really wasn't the problem for me. The problem was just how much they kind of were disregarding the universe around them, and they were kind of just throwing things at the wall, and the things they threw had cataclysmic damage. The Force Awakens Star Killer base that destroyed a bunch of planets and just happens to kill a lot of the New Republic. They need to be careful with stuff like that, especially how, you know, starting with Star Wars Rebels, Rogue One, so many of those games that take place between episodes 3 and 4, and then all the original trilogy is all about taking down the Empire, restoring the Republic. So for, you know, episode 7, well, what Disney wants is episode 7, having them say, oh no, you know what, actually, let's destroy the Republic again, let's make them freedom fighter rebels. I just feel like there needs to be a lot more care and consideration into something that dramatic, which is sad because, you know, you look at the Thrawn trilogy of books, and the Empire were considered underdogs at the time. They were remnant factions, but someone like Thrawn was so competent, and he analyzed the failures of the Empire and the failures of the Rebel Alliance and New Republic and used it against them. It requires good writing, and good writing is understanding failures and then learning from those failures, and also, you know, how skill works. And the way skill works is, you know, a character is working on something, repetition, analysis, keeping at it. And so again, I love that Luke gave us, you know, these kind of explanations of what life was like at home. We understand that his father was a chosen one, that he definitely was destined, but still his choice to become a Jedi. And I think there's just a lot of great world building around a character that fails, around one of the most popular characters that fails, but at the end of the day, he succeeds by being strong. And so while Luke, I think, was poorly depicted in the Disney trilogy, I think there are ways that obviously the people that care about Star Wars, like Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau, have found outlets to show the Jedi Master Luke becomes, that we've seen in the video games, we saw in The Mandalorian Season 2. They have to be careful, and I have high hopes that, you know, people that respect that universe will continue to respect a character that inspired so many other people to pick themselves back up, turn on the lightsaber, and keep going. I love Mondays.